London, in the damp blush of an early spring evening, seemed determined to mock Lady Elara Whitmore as she stepped from her carriage. Rain clung to the cobblestones like spilled ink, reflecting the golden lanterns that led toward the Whitford estate where her former fiancé was soon to wed another. She felt each breath as though it were borrowed, thin and trembling. The footman offered to escort her, but she declined, knowing the pity in his eyes would be worse than the whispers awaiting her inside. The air hummed with distant laughter, the kind drawn effortlessly from happy throats, and she paused beneath the archway, wishing she could melt into the stone rather than face the night that had been designed to wound her. The ballroom greeted her with a brilliance that felt like punishment. Chandeliers dripped with crystal fire, scattering shards of light across swirling gowns and polished boots. Everywhere she turned, Elara sensed eyes sliding over her like blades dipped in honey. Some widened in feigned sympathy, others narrowed with smug delight. Her former fiancé, Lord Sebastian Hargrave, stood near the altar with a posture so proudly sculpted it seemed rehearsed. Beside him, his bride, radiant, jeweled, triumphant, placed a possessive hand upon his arm, tipping her head just enough for Elara to feel the sting of dismissal. A murmur fluttered through the room as Elara stepped fully into view, a tremor in the air that told her she had been expected, dissected, and silently judged long before her arrival. She had prepared herself for the whispers, yet their sharpness still startled her. "Poor thing," someone sighed behind a fan. "Imagine coming here alone." Another voice, deeper and mercilessly amused, murmured. "He traded her for fortune and finer breeding. A wise decision, some would say." The comments drifted like ash, settling upon her shoulders until she feared they would crush what remained of her dignity. She forced her chin higher, though her breath stuttered as she crossed the glossy floor. The music swelled to greet the bridal procession, and guests lined the aisle with eager reverence. Each step Elara took seemed to shrink her, as though the room conspired to remind her that she no longer belonged to any life she once imagined. Her gloved hand trembled as she adjusted the ribbon of her gown, hoping movement would disguise her faltering composure. But fate, ever cruel, found its moment. A passing waiter carrying a tower of champagne flutes swerved when a guest's skirts brushed his elbow, and the tray tilted. Glass shattered in a glittering cascade at Elara's feet. Laughter, thin, bright, merciless, bubbled instantly from nearby onlookers. Heat surged into her cheeks as though the chandeliers had turned upon her alone. She whispered an apology she did not owe, then stepped back, only to feel her glove snag against the carved edge of a marble column. The delicate seams tore open, exposing the trembling of her bare hand. A few spectators gasped, delighted by the unraveling of a woman they believed deserved to fall. Elara slipped toward the nearest alcove, its velvet curtains offering a narrow refuge from the ballroom's glittering cruelty. The distant music blurred into a dull ache as she pressed her back against the cool stone wall. For a moment she allowed herself to close her eyes, to breathe in a way she could not under the weight of 100 watching faces. She wondered why she had come at all, why pride had insisted she attend the wedding of the man who had once promised her forever. Perhaps she had hoped to show she still possessed dignity enough to stand unbroken. But now, with laughter echoing behind her, she felt like a ghost haunting the remnants of a life that no longer wanted her. Footsteps approached, steady and unhurried, unlike the skittering retreat of those who came merely to spectate misery. Elara stiffened, wiping the shimmer of humiliation from her cheeks before turning. A tall figure emerged from the shadowed corridor, his presence cutting through the dimness like a blade through silk. Duke Alastair Ravenswood, a man whispered about with equal parts fear and fascination, regarded her with an expression she could not decipher. His dark attire seemed to swallow the ambient light, and yet his eyes, cold, discerning, held her fast. She lowered her gaze in reflexive deference, for no one with sense met the Duke's stare for long. But he stepped closer, his voice a low current that brushed the air between them. "Lady Elara," he murmured, "London is unkind tonight." She opened her mouth to reply, but shame tangled her tongue. The Duke's gaze did not waver, though she sensed no mockery in it, only an unsettling intensity, as though he were cataloguing the fractures beneath her calm exterior. "Your suffering is quite the evening's entertainment," he said quietly, not as an insult but a lament. Elara's breath hitched, surprised by the rawness in his tone. No one had spoken to her with such plain regard all night. "I did not wish to be seen like this," she whispered. "No one wishes to be seen broken," he replied. His gloved hand lifted, stopping just short of touching her torn glove. But brokenness, Lady Alara, is simply honesty made visible. His eyes softened almost imperceptibly, a shift like moonlight brushing stone. Before she could gather a response, the strains of new music swelled from the ballroom, and voices rose in anticipation of the vows soon to be spoken. Alara felt the sound like a blow, a reminder of the future she had once been promised. Her knees wavered, and the Duke noticed. His hand, steady and assured, closed around hers before she could retreat. The contact shocked her into stillness. His voice dropped to a whisper that felt impossibly intimate in the shadowed space. "Pretend you are with me," he said. The words were neither command nor plea, but something dangerous in between. Alara's breath faltered as the curtains shifted, signaling someone approaching from the bright hall beyond. The ballroom erupted in a hush as the Duke guided Alara from the alcove, his gloved hand enclosing hers with an authority that stilled the nearest whispers. The chandeliers above cast fractured light over them, turning every step they took into a spectacle. Alara felt the weight of curious gazes, yet the Duke moved with the composure of a man accustomed to commanding storms. Murmurs rippled along their path like unsettled wind against window panes, gathering strength as more guests took notice of the imper. She wanted to retreat, to protest, to reclaim whatever fragile anonymity she possessed, but his hold was steady, neither possessive nor gentle, simply certain. When she dared glance toward him, she found no amusement in his expression, only a measured calm that unsettled her more than cruelty ever could. It felt as though he had drawn a veil between her and the world, and even the sharpest tongues hesitated to pierce it. Guests parted instinctively before them, reforming behind them like water closing aft. The bride, resplendent in white silk trimmed with gold, stiffened visibly as the pair approached. A flicker of confusion crossed her features, swiftly replaced by ire. Lord Sebastian, his pride always delicate, paled at the sight of Alara walking beside a man whose reputation could silence entire councils. His lips tightened with a dismay that delighted several onlookers. The scandal of such an association, Alara, the discarded fiancée, appearing not merely accompanied but claimed by Ravenswood, was irisi. The Duke paused in full view of the room and released Alara's hand only long enough to remove the heavy signet ring from his smallest finger. The gesture was slow, almost ceremonial. He turned her hand palm up with startling gentleness and slid the ring onto her middle finger. A collective gasp surged through the ballroom. The dark metal, engraved with the Ravenswood crest, gleamed like an oath forged in fire. Alara's breath hitched, but the Duke spoke before she could protest. "Let them see," he murmured. "Their cruelty is earned," she whispered back, her voice unsteady. "So is their fear," he replied, lifting his chin toward the nearest cluster of gawking guests. Even the boldest gossips shrank beneath the weight of his stare. Alara felt no safer for it. She felt exposed in a new, bewildering way, as though wrapped in a truth she had not chosen. A viscountess known for her venomous charm drifted toward them, her fan fluttering like the wings of a predatory bird. "Your Grace," she purred, "how unexpected to see you escorting Lady Alara. One might think you were making a declaration." Her gaze skimmed the ring with unmasked hunger for scandal. The Duke's reply was the verbal equivalent of a blade drawn without haste. "Declaration implies uncertainty," he said. "I do not suffer uncertainty." The Viscountess recoiled, and the onlookers followed her. Yet the Duke's words unsettled Alara. They echoed too loudly inside her chest. She wished to believe this was simply a gesture to silence cruelty, but the weight of the ring tugged at her hand, anchoring her to an enigma she scarcely understood. The Duke's calm expression betrayed nothing, but she sensed something coiled beneath it, a watchfulness sharpened by years of commanding fear and respect. As they resumed walking, she leaned closer and whispered, "This attention will devour me." He inclined his head slightly, not loosening his hold. "Then let it choke," he said. "I do not intend to release you to wolves." The conviction in his tone startled her, rich with layers she could not decipher. Was he protecting her out of principle, pity, or something far more dangerous? The uncertainty pressed against her ribs, heating her blood with equal parts dread and reluctant hope. Lord Sebastian approached then, his bride trailing behind him with the stiffness of porcelain on the verge of cracking. "Your Grace," Sebastian began, attempting a polite bow. There seems to be confusion. The Duke regarded him like one would consider an irrelevant object. Indeed, he said. The confusion lies in believing you retain any claim to Lady Alara's dignity. Sebastian flushed, stepping closer, his composure fracturing. This is my wedding, he hissed. Your presence is drawing attention. Speculation follows action, Ravenswood replied coolly. Had you treated her with honor, there would be nothing to question. The bride tugged at Sebastian's sleeve, whispering urgently, but he ignored her. His gaze, sharp with bitterness, fixed on the ring adorning Alara's hand. She wears your crest, he said, voice trembling. Are you suggesting an attachment? Alara tried to speak, but the Duke's voice cut through the tension, low and decisive. I suggest nothing, he said. I state plainly that she is beneath my protection. The words were not loud, yet they sliced through the room, stilling movement and breath alike. The bride's face blanched. Sebastian stepped back as though struck. The room's energy shifted, darker and hungrier, ready to twist this moment into legend. Alara's heart pounded as the Duke guided her away from the stunned couple. The murmurs swelled, crashing against her composure. She felt dizzy, caught between the comfort of his nearness and the peril of being marked so publicly by a man feared more than admired. As they neared the edge of the ballroom, a figure slipped into their path, a man with hurried breath and eyes wide with alarm. Your Grace, he said urgently, you must see this at once. There has been a discovery. The Duke's hand tightened around hers, steadying her even as dread curled through her stomach. The messenger swallowed hard, glancing at Alara with something like apology. It concerns the conservatory, he finished. The room seemed to tilt. Alara felt the world constrict, the air trembling as though on the edge of revelation. The warning settled over her like gathering stormlight slowly. The Duke's expression darkened, an omen she felt in her bones. And before she could ask what had been found, he drew her closer, his voice dropping to a quiet that sent shivers down her spine. The conservatory glimmered in moonlit stillness as the Duke ushered Alara through its glass-paneled doors, closing them behind them with a decisive click that muffled the rising tumult of the ballroom. The air within was cool and perfumed, heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and damp roses. Lanterns glowed low along the walls, their flickering flames casting shadows that swayed like restless memories. Alara hesitated at the threshold, her pulse still battered by the scandal raging beyond, yet the Duke's hand remained firm at the small of her back, guiding her deeper into the secluded space as though he intended to place the entire world between her and its watching eyes. Whatever has been discovered, she whispered, I do not understand what it has to do with me. Her voice faltered, thin as the mist clinging to the glass. The Duke did not answer immediately. Instead, he led her toward a small wrought-iron bench nestled beneath a canopy of pale blossoms. Only when she lowered herself upon it, more from unsteady knees than obedience, did he finally speak. Information becomes dangerous only when left unspoken. Silence creates room for invention, and society delights in inventing sins for those already wounded. She stared at him, bewildered. Then tell me plainly. He turned away, pacing a few steps across the tiled floor. The light caught the edges of his profile, sharp and inscrutable, yet there was tension in the line of his shoulders that betrayed something deeper, something that did not belong to a man who ruled every room he entered. A footman was found unconscious near the far end of this conservatory, he said. He carried notes describing you, Lady Alara. Notes meant for the gossip papers. Her breath caught. About me? But why? Because cruelty is profitable. He faced her fully now, his expression shifting from cold authority to a shadow of something more protective. Your humiliation tonight would have